we ready to do this thing? Let me grab the book. It's right here. And I did terrible on my scratch offs. I only won a few. I was sitting here in the last part of the live scratching them. I did terrible. Wasn't good. Sucks. Stop it, Mittens. Be nice. Hi, guys. Come on in. Don't be shy. Hey, Captain Lee. Aw, really, Captain Lee? That's wonderful, Captain Lee. That's wonderful. Oh, see, she wanted to make sure you're old. She wanted to let you know that she's good. She came to show you that she's good. Taking a little Ambien. Taking a little Ambien crumble. Yeah, get my camera on. Back. Get a little tiny bit. See how small? Take a tiny, tiny, tiny. Lex, could you turn it down a little? No. Bless you. Okay. All the yarn from this. Remember? Okay, let's see. I was asleep and felt something. Oh, wait, let me put it up here. I'll put it on the. Wow. So happy for you. Hi, Janae Ann. Aw, that's wonderful. Wonderful, Captain Lee. We're going to finish the story we started earlier about the author that bought the mansion, the Victorian house, Victorian mansion. The new owner asked around and soon learned a few of the tales associated with the house. Hello, Lark. Hi, Denise. I'll say hi after I get this read so I don't keep stopping. I do too, Captain Lee. I really do too. Footsteps were sometimes heard in the upper hallway when only one person was home. The invisible walker would hurry down the servants' staircase, through the kitchen, and out the back door. And a guest had once heard someone walking outside the door of his room and called out, thinking that his wife was approaching. The woman's voice that answered was that of a complete stranger. When he got up to see who it was, there was no one in the hallway. The new owner had yet to hear any of these mysterious sounds herself, although her son claimed that one afternoon, shortly after they moved in, he had heard the inner door to the foyer rattling all by itself, followed by the sound of footsteps mounting the main staircase and walking down the second floor hallway. Undaunted, the new owner threw herself into decorating the house, adding personal touches to the spacious rooms. Over several weeks, it began to feel like home, but she still had not found a picture to hang on in the stairwell. Then one day, she heard that Sunnybank was going to be torn down. She was shocked by the news and saddened that the town would soon be deprived of such a historic house, the one where Albert Payson Terhune had lived and written and raised his famous collie dogs. All of the Sunnybank furnishings were going to be auctioned off, and she felt it appropriate to bid on some of them and put them into the house where Terhune's sister once resided. At the auction, the first thing the new owner saw was an 8-foot reproduction of a painting called Christ for the High Priest. Let me put my cardigan on, guys. It's just right there in the utility room. I've got to grab it. Getting chilly. Take me 1 second. Okay, I'm right here. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I think she did find Daddy in heaven and they're having fun. I would bet you on that. I sure would. Yes, I would. Okay, 8-foot reproduction of a Dutch painting called Christ Before the High Priest. It would be perfect for the wall behind the staircase. She bid on it, won it, and had it brought to her home across the lake for installation. Good morning, Cole. It looked absolutely stunning on the wall in the stairwell, and she frequently paused to admire it from the foyer. The new owner was studying the painting one afternoon when her eye was caught by the figure of a man hurrying down the main staircase from the second floor. The stranger was very tall, with ruggedly handsome features and broad shoulders. "Oh, you called me sweet and beautiful." She was startled by the unexpectedness of his appearance. Here is the house that she bought. The author. Well, he was an author that owned the house. She bought it. I think he might have actually written the Lassie shows, maybe, or Lassie movies, or the story, because it was called My Dog Lad. Yeah. I believe these are real people. Alicia was supposed to look it up. That was her homework. Did you, Captain Lee? Well, you needed the rest. I was just talking to her right before I came live. I don't know if she's here listening or not. She might be listening because she's in her massage chair. Sorry, I keep wiping my nose. It keeps itching. It's this right here, the yarn. It comes, see it sheds. It's kind of like those mohair sweaters people used to wear. That's what it reminds me of. Okay. Hi, Leslie Romani. Okay, the new owner had yet to hear any of the mysterious sounds herself, although her son claimed that one afternoon, shortly after they moved in, he had heard the inner door to the foyer rattling all by itself, followed by the sound of footsteps mounting the main staircase and walking down the second floor hallway. Undaunted, the new owner threw herself into decorating the house, adding personal touches to the spacious rooms. Over several weeks, it began to feel like home, but she still had not found a picture to hang in the stairwell. Then, one day, she heard that St. Sunnybank was going to be torn down. She was shocked by the news. Oh, wait, I already read that. Sorry. See? Shouldn't take Ambien before you read. I already read. Sorry, guys. I'll get better. "Who are you?" she demanded at once. "What are you doing in my house?" The man stopped on the small landing and looked at her over the banister. The large picture from the Terhune estate framed the back of his head. "Hi, Lindell." That was when she recognized her visitor. It was Terhune himself, the original owner of the painting. She was seeing a ghost. She shivered, her arms breaking out in goosebumps, as she and Terhune stared at one another for a timeless moment. Then the ghost disappeared. She sank down onto the closet chair, shaking from head to toe. Her son entered the room a moment later and came over to her quickly when he saw her agitation. "What is it? What's wrong?" he asked. She told him what she had seen. So it's Terhune who's been hunting this house, her son mused, looking up the stairwell. She shook her head. I think that Terhune's ghost came here with the painting. The other footsteps sounded on the servants' staircase, and the voice that he heard belonged to a woman. But I heard someone come in the front door and walk up the grand staircase, her son said. And that's where you saw Terhune. She nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps we have two ghosts, she concluded. Her son grinned. Still want to live in this house? He asked teasingly. She considered his question for a moment, remembering the look she had shared with the author. Then she smiled. Yes, I do. And so they remained in the house where Terhune's sister had once lived. Although the new owner heard occasional footsteps walking up the staircases or moving around on the second floor, she never saw the ghost of Albert Payson Terhune again. Hi, Cat's got my. Oh, just what the doctor ordered for you to come in here too and listen to me. That makes me happy. Okay, I don't know that we read this one, The Figure in the Window. So many of these sound alike. I think we read them and then I realized we hadn't. But if you think we did, let me know. I'll glance up every now and then and check. The Figure in the Window from P-Pack, New Jersey. Hi, Sea Call. Amen, cats. You need what the doctor ordered too. And he ordered all you for me to come listen. Because he knows I like to read. And I like reading out loud to people. Just like when I had my kids little and my grandkids were littler. The three of us were hanging around the local diner, drinking coffee late one evening when Alex said he wanted to go up to P-Pack to check out a house for sale. I had volunteered to drive that night since Alec, my boyfriend, oh, we did read this. We read it. I think. Do you call? I do too. They're really a nice pattern and nice and bright. Yeah. Let's see. I asked Alec what was so special about this particular house. And he said it was an old rundown Italianate mansion with 26 fireplaces, an indoor swimming pool, and a squash court. Pretty sure we read this. Okay, let's see. I don't think we've read this one, Brotherly Love from Springfield, New Jersey. Well, yeah, that's true too. Cat's got my. I have thought of that, where some people probably didn't even hear the ending. So it probably won't hurt every now and then to reread something. I'm going to mark this one though so I know that I did read it. Okay, Brotherly Love, Springfield. My younger brother and I have been rivals since the day of his birth, a mere 14 months after my own. When he wasn't taking the exact opposite point of view from me, usually in the loudest tone possible, he was trying to one up my achievements. Naturally, as his older brother, I found these endearing, quote unquote, traits very annoying and expressed a frequent desire to give the little twit the thrashing he deserved. I would have done it too, except Ma wouldn't let me. At first, it was little things that irked me. If Pa asked me to milk the cows and I got the chore done in record time, then the next day my LB, little brother, would beat my time by 5 minutes and boast about it for a week thereafter. If I decided to recite a sad poem in school, LB would choose a rollicking, funny poem that would have the class in stitches. I was an intellectual who got the best marks in school, so LB became a cut up who had to be forced to study. I built a tree house where I could read my books in peace. LB built a fortress where he and his friends could pretend to be frontiersmen conquering the Wild West. Do you see what I mean by a twit? I'm going to mark this one and then reading it. Unfortunately, LB's contrary tendencies led him politically astray when he reached adulthood. As our nation started to fray around the debate over slavery, I backed the North's belief in freedom for all men. Within hours of my expressing this viewpoint, LB came out swinging for the South, claiming that the end of slavery would ruin that region's economy. He quoted a lot of political jargon that made me grit my teeth. My parents were fair-minded folks. They didn't like LB's viewpoint, but they respected his right to have his own opinion. None of us was really surprised when he left our Springfield home to join forces with General Robert E. Lee. Hello, Kevin. Once the real fighting started. When I left home to join up with the Yankee forces opposing them, Ma said to me, "Try not to kill your little brother, son. I'd prefer it if you both came home alive when all this is over." I gave her a doubtful look, and she chuckled, albeit a tad teary-eyed. You've managed to refrain from killing him so far," she reminded me. "Not from lack of inclination, I assure you," I replied. She and Pa laughed aloud. And that was how I remembered them during the long, brutal years of the war. I was injured just before it ended, so I missed the final months of conflict and the initial resolution. When I came to my senses, it was just to discover that Lee had surrendered. Lincoln had been assassinated, and LB was safely home, covered with medals and glory for his service. He had spent much of his free time beside my bed. This would have been more touching if he had taken off his Confederate uniform. "Well, BB," he said to me, meaning Big Brother. He had taken to calling me Big Brother, BB, within seconds of my calling him LB. "You Northerners won this round, but only by a whisker." "That's what you think," I whispered weakly, sipping at the glass of water he held to my lips. I didn't hear the whole story until some of my strength had returned. Lucky for him, LB was as saddened by Lincoln's assassination as the rest of us. "A good man," was his assessment, a bit misguided, he added, with a sidelong look at me, "but a good man." Only respect for my mother kept me from assassinating LB for that jibe. Our whole family turned out on Monday, April 24th, 1865, to pay our respects to President Lincoln, whose body had been brought from Philadelphia to Jersey City on a funeral train for the Lincolns called the Lincoln Special. His coffin was removed from the railroad car, taken by ferry across the Hudson River, driven down to New York City Hall, and carried up the circular staircase. Under the rotunda, it was placed on a black velvet dais. Respectful citizens waited in line for hours that day to say goodbye. I broke down and cried when I viewed the face of the man for whom I had fought in that terrible war. LB steadied me as we moved slowly away, since I hardly had the strength to walk, and my right arm was still in a sling. We stayed overnight with some friends in the city so that we could attend the funeral procession the next day. Around 2 p.m., the president's coffin was placed on a magnificent funeral car drawn by 16 horses. Hi, Mary. Wearing long blankets. The procession began on Broadway and ended at the Hudson River Railway Depot. The papers later estimated that nearly 75,000 citizens had marched through New York's packed streets, and I heard that windows along the route had rented for up to $100 a person. Be a heck of a lot of money back then. Back in Springfield, LB stayed home only long enough to ensure my return to good health. Then he was gone, having moved to the next town to pursue a career, and the pretty red-headed nurse who had looked after me when I was ill. The next thing I knew, he and I were both married with families of our own, and it was our sons who were trying to outdo one another. Our wives got along great, which was more than could be said for LB and me. Yet one day our time came, and we were buried side by side in our family plot in Springfield. Mary, that's cute. Once in a while, I felt the need to come back and ponder life while floating over the places I had once called home. It wasn't that I didn't like heaven. I just wanted to see how things had changed. The second time I returned to Earth, I was musing upon the happy times I had had with my wife when LB suddenly turned up and sat down on his tombstone. I had returned in spirit form only, but not LB. No, he was a full-blown apparition, glowing from the radiance that became a natural part of us once we entered the holy realm. He was dressed in his Confederate uniform and was even wearing his medals. Well, that was the final straw. I materialized in my resplendent Union uniform, also covered with medals, sat down on my tombstone, and glared at LB. Must you follow me everywhere I go? I demanded icily. Only when you go interesting places, LB replied jauntily. And why are you wearing that ridiculous uniform? I asked. You lost the war, remember? We fought with courage and honor, LB retorted, and President Lincoln himself said that the North and South were to be friends in his speech at Gettysburg. At least I think that's where he said it. Here's a picture, an illustration, him and his brother coming back as spirits, sitting on the tombstones. Sorry. Hope you guys can see that. What do you mean she made contact? She made contact with Carolyn. It's all good. Thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah, Sarah. Karen, wait, I want to read that. I want to read that just a minute. That's funny. Go into her head. Thank you, Mary. Oh, I know how that goes. Getting messed with for taking up for Carolyn. And well, that's such a crime. We're public enemy number one. I don't do it as much as I used to because I'm trying to ignore all them. You never can remember things correctly, I shouted, jumping up and shaking my finger at him. It was at his first inaugural address on March 4th, 1861. The pres- that President Lincoln said, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." The meaning of the words hit me suddenly, and I sat down rather abruptly on my tombstone, staring at my lifelong enemy, at my friend, at my little brother. Oh, wait, okay, I'll look in a second, Kevin, at that. It was at this interesting juncture that a young man dressed in a rather rumpled suit and carrying a bottle in a brown bag came staggering toward us. His mouth hung open in amazement at the sight of two arguing ghosts. Elby and I looked at each other and then at the man. Suddenly, we both leapt to our feet and shouted, "Boo!" as loudly as we could. The drunken fellow gave a shriek of terror and ran away so fast that he left his bottle behind. Elby and I hooted with laughter. Then Elby picked up the bottle and looked at it meditatively. "I wouldn't drink that if I were you," I said. "You don't know where it's been." "So what? Do you think it'll kill me?" asked the ghost of my brother. "If it doesn't, I might," I replied. We grinned at each other, for once in complete harmony. Then we disappeared, leaving the graveyard to rest in its rather solemn peace. So they really give her a lot of heck. I heard her being called out when I was listening to one of those channels for a while one day, and they were calling her out because she had said something, I guess, about Natasha and her donations or I don't know what it was. Hi, Tina Bina. Kevin said, hi, Lex. Oh, she's down. She's down the hall. She's in the bathroom. She doesn't hear. No, it's still there, Captain Lee. She chooses, she chooses not to pay it any mind right now. And she's much happier. Okay, we read The Girl in the Mirror. We read In the Sweet By and By. I don't know if we read this one. Yeah, Kevin, cups, mugs, says coffee, fresh brewed, latte, mocha, cafe au lait. There's like takeout coffee cup. Yeah, I don't really either, Kevin. I mean, I will stop in here or there just to see who they're talking about, see if there's anything to laugh about, and then go on my way. It's pretty boring, actually, these communities right now. Just so strange, too, how so many of them. Cafe curtains, that's right. Yeah, Captain. I think it's just so strange how they've all went with that creator, all forgiven her and all this and that. And they're all lovey-dovey, and let's not talk about her, and let's all just band together. And I don't know. Strange. I guess that's how it goes, though, right? Give it 6 months and they'll all be right back where they were, probably. I don't know. I do get a kick out of it because, like I said, I am a people watcher. And I do like to try to figure out what's going on sometimes, how people think. The Ghost in the Storm, Morristown. And hi, Moo. I don't think I said hi to you. Hi, Tammy. It was a bitterly cold day, and the air was heavy with the threat of snow. I swept off the front steps carefully and chipped away at the frozen puddle that had formed when icicles on the eaves had started to melt. I didn't expect many customers to visit the tavern on such a miserable day. But the chores still needed to be done. Once the steps were clear, I went inside to polish the glasses and make sure the bar was sparkling. Outside, I heard the wind pick up. By the time the first of the evening's customers blew into Arnold's Tavern, it was snowing. Horrible weather we're having, called old Nate Taylor. a large red-faced man who took a seat at the bar with two friends. Worst winter in years, I agreed. Not so bad for us working men, but it is really hard on General Washington's troops. My wife is constantly knitting scarves and socks and whatnot to take up to the boys in Jockey Hollow. I set drinks in front of Nate and his buddies. My wife's up half the night sewing clothes and and blankets. We have a boy with the New Jersey militia, said Henry, the owner of the mercantile, looking grave. He's been lucky so far. Survived both the Battle of Trenton and the action down in Princeton. I hear that Washington has ordered his Continentals and the New Jersey militia to engage enemy outposts, Nate said. Want to contain the British by harassing and tiring them with constant patrols. That's what he says, I agreed. General Washington had been using Arnold's Tavern as his headquarters since he came to Morristown after the British drove the Continental Army out of New York. I had come to know and respect the general during the long winter. After fighting the British to a standstill at White Plains, General Washington had moved most of his army south into New Jersey, reasoning that the British would soon try to take control of Philadelphia, as they had just done in New York City. The British general, Cornwallis, had started attacking the Continentals as soon as they arrived in New Jersey. Things looked pretty grim for Washington and his men. Then Howe ordered the British Army into winter quarters, and Washington seized his chance. The Continentals attacked the British twice, once at Trenton in December 1776, and once in Princeton in January 1777, and won both battles. Folks here in Morristown had started questioning Washington's fitness to lead the troops after his defeat in New York, but the two New Jersey victories helped put a lot of speculation to rest. I didn't agree with the talk and was glad when it died down. My wife's parents were Tories, but the missus and I were staunch believers in freedom from Britain. I was glad to serve the war effort, even if the most I could do with my arthritic legs was to serve General Washington drinks on the house. The general was continually telling me that the militia had problems finding new recruits and that many men had already deserted. The British also suffered from desertions, but they were actively enlisting as many of our countrymen as they could seduce with their promises. Our militia and the enemy's foraging parties had frequent skirmishes in which the British usually sustained greater losses. Hi, help me, Rhonda. I know you are too, Kevin. In killed and wounded, owing to the superior skill of our boys in the use of firearms. The storm outside was getting worse. Nate and his buddies finished their drinks, wrapped up tight against the weather, and went home. The tavern was empty, and I wasn't expecting to see anyone else that night. However, 2 hours later, the general himself staggered in, accompanied by his driver. He was half frozen. I hurried to help him out of his soaking outer garments, then settled him into a chair with a drink. The missus had heard him arrive, and she soon entered the tavern with plates full of food, which the general and his driver ate with gratitude. By this time, I knew the general well enough to know there was something bothering him besides the cold weather. I did not ask any questions, just kept him supplied with drinks and food. Several of his soldiers came into the bar to speak with him, but he quickly dismissed them and later his driver. When we were alone, Washington sat back in his chair and studied me closely. "Do you believe in ghosts?" he asked me point blank. I blinked. finding the question unexpected. Did I believe in ghosts? I'd never seen one, but my wife often complained that her grandmother's ghost stole the clothespins out of her laundry basket and used them to entertain the baby when the child was supposed to be taking a nap. Since the old lady in question had undoubtedly done this in life, I was not surprised that she continued to do so after death. Yes, I do believe in ghosts, I said cautiously. Why do you ask? The general stirred uneasily and looked down at his plate. We were driving back to Morristown from Summit when the blizzard came blowing down upon our carriage, he finally said. It was difficult to see, but as we continued, slowing down the road, I looked through the window and glimpsed a poor child, a pretty little brown-haired girl, staggering through the rapidly deepening drifts. I called to my driver to stop and pick her up. I thought we could take her home, but just as the driver got down from the carriage, she vanished, disappeared into thin air. When we looked around for her, we realized there were no footprints in the snow. I gasped in astonishment. See, there's that word gasped again. The general nodded solemnly, then continued. We stopped at the next house to inquire after the girl, not ready to believe we had seen a phantom. The woman at the house knew instantly of whom we spoke. The little girl drowned in a cistern several years ago, and her ghost continues to walk the section of the road on which we traveled this night. It is said that the little girl has sometimes saved other children from similar accidents, and that her spirit is there to protect travelers. Did you need protecting? I asked him. I do not know, the general said. As we left, the young son of the house ran in from the yard to tell his mother that some of the local men had just captured several British soldiers. Here's the illustration of the little girl that they saw walking. Several British soldiers who were raiding the nearby settlement. The soldiers were located only a half mile down the road from where we stopped. If we had not seen the little girl's ghost, we would have driven right into the midst of them with unknown consequences. The general drained his glass and set it down. Let's just say that I'm thankful to be alive this night. He rose, stretched, and bid me good night. As I locked up the tavern, I mused upon the general's story. Whoever the phantom girl was, I was grateful to her for halting the general's carriage before it ran into the British raiders. I had a feeling that Washington was going to be a key player in this war against the British. We couldn't afford to lose him. Picking up the general's plate and glass, I carried them into the kitchen and went to tell my wife about the ghost in the storm. Now I need to mark that one. You have twins too? Help me, Rhonda. Who else has twins? I'm going to read this one. Um, Turnabout is Fair Play from Branchville, New Jersey. Let me know if you've heard this, okay? It sounds familiar, but then it doesn't. Old Uncle Phil was a tall scarecrow of a fella who was jumpier than a grasshopper. He lived and worked on a small farm near Branchville, and he believed that the hostile world was largely populated with monsters and ghosts and spooks and witches and werewolves. Uncle Phil believed in just about every sort of scary critter that you can imagine. He shied away from shadows, jumped whenever anyone spoke to him, and lived in perpetual fear that someone, somewhere, was out to get him. Uncle Phil wore so many amulets that he chimed and rattled and clanked wherever he moved, whenever he moved. Early in life, he took a trip to Pennsylvania Dutch country to learn what the most powerful hex signs were so he could paint them on his house and barn. He even planted a special garden around his house that was full of trees and bushes and plants designed to thwart the forces of evil. Uncle Phil hated to go outside after dark. He always carried a lantern with him so as not to be caught anywhere without light. He even took the long way home rather than walk through the ominous woods surrounding the river. He became so paranoid that he refused to shake hands with anyone because it might allow an evil spirit to enter him, and he never entered a house that had a cat because he thought that the animal might be an imp or a witch's familiar. Uh-oh, Moo. He wouldn't come in your house, Moo. He wouldn't come in mine either. Naturally, this attitude made Uncle Phil the butt of many jokes. Children, in particular, took a rather cruel delight in plaguing the old man. At first, it was just small things, like stealing the apples from his orchard, tossing rocks into his path from behind trees, or tapping his shoulder when he was buying groceries in the store. The youngsters would howl with laughter when Uncle Phil yelped and whirled around, and they giggled and whispered whenever he complained about the goblins who stole all his apples away. One summer, a new family moved to town with two sons who were very naughty indeed. As soon as they learned about Jumpy Uncle Phil, those boys became obsessed with tormenting him. They snuck out to his place one night and painted all over his hex signs. Oh, you have fraternal. Yeah, two boys, technically men. They'll be turning 23 this year. Oh, how cool. That's really neat. And help me, Rhonda, you have twins. A boy and a girl, right? 17 almost. Very neat. When Uncle Phil woke up the next morning, the barn and the house were bare. He ran all the way to town on foot, forgetting that he owned a horse, because he was sure the devil had removed the hex signs in order to steal his soul away while he slept. The old man crouched in a pew in the local church and wouldn't leave until the minister had prayed over his house and the neighborhood painter had recreated the hex signs. A week after this event, the boys gathered all of the black cats in town and put them into Uncle Phil's house while he was away. When Uncle Phil opened the door, his dog rushed into the front room. Fur started flying everywhere as the black cats hissed and scratched and yowled and bit. Back ran Uncle Phil to the church, and back came the minister with some helpers to clear the house of black cats and bless it against any evil witches who wanted to curse Uncle Phil. The boys were forced to lay low for a while after this incident, which had upset all the adults in town. The school children were subjected to a lecture on cruelty and instructed to report any mischief committed against Uncle Phil. Of course, all the children who knew who the culprits were, but no one told. For a month, Uncle Phil was left in peace. No fruit disappeared from his orchards. No mysterious ghost tapped his shoulder. No goblins tossed rocks at him from the trees. Then the boys came up with another plan. One night, they snuck in Uncle Phil's house through the parlor window, dragging a scarecrow inside with them. They set up the scarecrow so that it loomed over the poor sleeping man with one arm out thrust, as if it wanted to shake hands with him. Then they positioned a lantern on a tree branch just outside the second-story room so that the light illuminated the scarecrow's grotesque face. You too, Cole. Once everything was in place, the boys started moaning and groaning and calling Uncle Phil's name from the yard outside his bedroom window. Uncle Phil woke with a gasp and then screamed in sheer terror when his eyes encountered the scarecrow. Leaping off the bed, he dove out of his bedroom window and climbed to the very top of the tree. From his high perch, Uncle Phil clutched desperately at the various charms he wore under his nightshirt and said the 23rd Psalm aloud. Below him, the lantern rocked dangerously and then fell to the ground, setting fire to the woodpile beside the bed. The boys stopped laughing when they realized that Uncle Phil's house was on fire. They ran to the barn and wet some old sacks in the water barrel. Together, they managed to put out the fire, but not before the whole side of the house was scorched. In the tree above them, they could hear Uncle Phil begging God to spare him from the terrible devil who had come with his grotesque face and his flames to take Uncle Phil's soul. Afraid of what their parents would do if they discovered the trick. What? The boys you threw me off now.
You're welcome.
Let's see, where was I? The boys snuck into the house and removed the scarecrow before hightailing it home. In the morning, Uncle Phil came down from the top of the tree and went to fetch the preacher. The minister and many of the leading citizens in town were amazed when they saw the huge scorch mark on the side of Uncle Phil's house where he claimed the devil had come and tried to take away his soul. Uncle Phil shivered and shook all morning as people came to inspect his house. He was still dressed in his nightshirt because he refused to go back inside to change. Finally, the minister's wife took Uncle Phil home with her and tucked him into bed with a bowl of hot soup. The minister had to perform a third ritual cleansing of the farm before Uncle Phil would return to his property. The boys were afraid to play any more pranks after their last escapade ended so dramatically. Life went back to normal for Uncle Phil. at least as normal as it could be for someone who believed in ghosts and goblins and witches and werewolves and all sorts of crazy critters. Then, about a month after the devil's visit, Uncle Phil passed away in his sleep. The whole town turned out for his funeral, and many folks were saddened that such a colorful figure had left their lives. I don't think I showed you the scarecrow. The boys felt terrible about the old man's death, afraid that their trick with the scarecrow might have weakened him and caused his final passing. But they were scared to confess that they were the ones who had played the trick on Uncle Phil. They grew very quiet in school and did their chores listlessly at home. The mother was so worried by their lack of spirit that she started treating them with cod liver oil and mustard plasters. Nothing helped. 2 weeks after Uncle Phil's death, the boys woke to find their bedroom full of black cats. You like that, huh, Leslie? Um, the boys shouted in alarm, which made the cats hiss and scratch and yowl and bite. Their parents came running into the room and were furious at the scene. The boys could not convince them that they did not know how the cats got there. A week passed. When the boys came home from school one afternoon, they saw that a hex sign had been painted on their barn, the very same sign that they had painted over on Uncle Phil's barn. The boys let out a yell of terror and ran inside their house, pulling their mother away from her bread dough to look at the barn. But when they reached the far wall, the hex sign was gone. For the next several days, the boys were tormented by an unseen foe. Rotten fruit would pelt them as they walked through the woods. Someone would tap their shoulders in the schoolyard, causing them to yelp and whirl around, only to find that no one was there. After dark, the boys would hear the chiming and clanking sound of amulets as they walked along the shadowy lanes near their home. One night, the boys woke to hear a voice moaning their names over and over again. They sat up in their beds and lit the lantern, which illuminated a grotesque scarecrow looming in the center of the room. The boys screamed in terror, and the younger lad leapt into bed with his brother as the scarecrow started to move toward them. "I have come for your soul," it moaned, waving its arms about. Then the scarecrow started laughing. It shook a finger at the cowering boys, and they heard the chiming and clanking of amulets. One arm reached up and snatched off the scarecrow's head, revealing the glowing, partially transparent face of Uncle Phil. Hi, Felicia. Hi, Jackie Burns. Uh, Gotcha, said the ghost of Uncle Phil with a huge grin. Then he disappeared. The boys were torn between abject terror and amusement. They clung together, alternating between laughing and crying, until their parents came in to see what was causing all the ruckus. The teary-eyed boys told their parents the whole story, starting with the tricks they had played on Uncle Phil and ending with the pranks his ghost had pulled on them. They pointed out the wisp of hay on the floor and the painted sack that the ghost had used as a scarecrow's head. When the boys finished their story, their father sat back against the wall and started to laugh heartily. "It serves you right," he said. "After all, turnabout is fair play." The boys had to agree with him. After that, they stuck to their games and school rivalries and never played another practical joke again. Mark this one off. I actually set my alarm to wake up at 12 for this, for the live tomorrow, because Carolyn's so excited about it. I hope it works out. I hope they do get a good signal. I know when we were out on the ocean, I don't think I got a signal. I might have a little bit. Yeah, I might. I think I did, maybe. Come to think of it. Let's see. You still here, Mo? Still awake? Apples and oranges, Bordentown. I finished lacing my skates and headed onto the ice of the local pond. It was a crisp, clear winter day with an endlessly blue sky and just a few wisps of pure white cloud to compete with the snowy ground. Absolutely lovely. I drew in a deep breath of chilly air and commenced skating with a fairly competent figure eight. The kids were already out on the ice, laughing and skating in circles, tugging at one another and shouting loudly. They were, I knew, trying to attract the attention of the ghost of Joseph Bonaparte, the one-time king of Spain, who now haunted this place. I wasn't sure if it would work by all reports. The ghost usually appeared at dusk, but they were lucky today. As I watched their cavorting from a safe distance, an apple rolled onto the ice, right to the foot of my nephew. He gave a shout and bent to pick it up, only to have it disappear just before his hand reached it. Garnet. Garnet, what are you doing? Me too, my niece cried excitedly, waving in the direction from which the apple had been thrown. Before the words had left her mouth, she was bonked on the head by an orange that bounced away across the ice. Laughing, she gave chase, but the orange disappeared after a few feet. Rubbing her head dramatically, she skated over to me and plopped down on the ice. "Why does he do it?" she asked, as another apple rolled towards us. I grinned, lunged for the apple, and toppled to the ice beside her in triumph. The apple clutched in my hand for a moment. It vanished before our eyes as my nephew joined us, sliding to a seat. It's just a game that the ghost likes to play. When he was alive, Joseph Bonaparte used to encourage the local townsfolk to come skate on his pond by rolling fresh apples and oranges from his greenhouses out to them. Back then, during the winter, folks mostly ate old apples they had stored in their cellars or preserved in jams and jellies. Oranges were even rarer since they came only with the big trading ships. So having the former king of Spain give them fresh fruit from his greenhouse was a big treat. And because he did it in such a playful way, he did not insult anyone's pride with his generosity. Oh, good. You got your new phone. 4 devices. Wow, Moo. Was he really the brother of Napoleon Bonaparte? Asked my niece, wide-eyed. She had just studied the French Revolution and its aftermath in school. I nodded with a grin. What was he doing in New Jersey? Asked my nephew. Living here, of course, just like you and me, I replied, and told them the following story. Joseph Bonaparte was placed on the throne of Naples and then Spain by his famous brother, Napoleon. Unsuccessful, in defending Spain against England during the Peninsular Wars, Joseph was forced to abdicate the throne in 1813. He went into exile in America after Napoleon's eventual defeat. Little kid skating on the ice, trying to grab the apples. At first, the ex-king tried to settle in Pennsylvania, but they wouldn't sell land to a foreigner, even a royal one, and Joseph refused to apply for American citizenship. The folks in New Jersey were more generous. They passed a special act that allowed Joseph to purchase 800 acres at Point Breeze in Bordertown. Joseph claimed that once, while he and his brother were studying a map, Napoleon had pointed to this place and said that if ever he were forced into exile, he would live halfway between the great seaports of New York and Philadelphia. From that location, he could obtain the very latest news from France and Spain. So Joseph took his infamous brother's advice. As befitting royalty, even the dethroned sort, Joseph built himself a lovely mansion with beautiful landscape grounds and plenty of parkland. Joseph was afraid that Spanish or French patriots might try to assassinate him, so he had escape tunnels built underneath the property. These tunnels led out to the river and the road, and to a few connected buildings on the property. Joseph started entertaining many of the great men of his day. President John Adams, the Marquis of Lafayette, the statesman Daniel Webster, all visited the nobleman's mansion during his stay in America. During this time, many Frenchmen also came to see the former king, and their presence sparked a strange story in the local community, namely that these expatriates had smuggled Napoleon himself into America after spreading rumors that the emperor had died on St. Helen. No one ever saw Napoleon with their own eyes, though. Joseph had a string of beautiful young mistresses while he lived in America. The rather unpleasant Mistress Bonaparte had decided to remain in Europe rather than go into exile with him. He led a very glamorous social life, throwing marvelous parties with mountains of food and many guests. The Americans were very impressed with the former king, and he with them. When his mansion burned to the ground, his neighbors actually helped carry out the salvageable furniture and paintings, and a chest of gold coins. Joseph was astonished. If he had been in France in similar conditions, the gold coins and quite possibly the expensive furnishings would have been stolen. Oh, I won't, Captain Lee. I won't. That does sound good. Once things settled down in Europe, Joseph went to Florence, Italy to rejoin his wife. He remained there until his death in 1844. They say that people in Point Breeze sometimes still hear the rattle and clink of cutlery, the murmur of voices punctuated by laughter, and the faint sound of music coming from underneath their feet. Perhaps a few leftover party guests are still roaming the tunnels. Hey, Deb. Oh, I needed to make you a mod. I'm not on YouTube, but I will be, and I'll get you. If you comment under one of my videos, then I can make you a mod. I just don't think I can do it on here. Yeah, it won't do it on here. On StreamYards, it won't. Let's see. Perhaps a few leftover party guests are still roaming the tunnels. The property now houses the Divine World Missionaries rather than a former king, and the tunnels have been blocked or closed after many years of disuse, but the ghost of Joseph Bonaparte still comes to his former parkland to play games with people skating on the pond. As I finished my story, another orange rolled across the ice and bumped into my right skate. The three of us looked up. For just an instant, I saw a sketchy, elegant figure in the beautifully cut formal clothing of another era, smiling at us from the shore. I waved, and Joseph, if that's who it was, bowed graciously and vanished from view. I reached out and touched the skin of the orange with one finger. It felt cold and solid, but vanished when I attempted to grasp it. I brought my finger away and lifted it to my nose. It smelled of orange. Come on, I exclaimed, rising to my feet and pulling up my niece and nephew. I'll race you to the far side of the pond. I set off immediately, and the kids shrieked in delight and followed at once. Behind us, a few more apples skimmed the surface of the pond. I thought I heard a whisper of elegant music in the distance. Then it was gone. Let's see. That's probably going to be it. I'm starting to get tired. Father and Son, we read that. We read Shades of Death. Wait, let's see how long this one is. I might read this one. I'll read this one last one. This is the place to be. On Washington Rock. This is from Washington Rock State Park, Greenbrook. The dream was so vivid that she didn't realize at first that it was a dream. The party was crowded, the guests cheerful, the food delicious. Then a rumor began to circulate among the guests. The devil was coming to a party. The devil was on his way. Okay, Kevin. And you're welcome, Kevin. It's a short one, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. Then we'll be done. Moments later, a hush came over the crowd. Turning to locate its cause, she saw a tall, handsome, blond man standing in the doorway, greeting his hostess. Around her, the murmurs began. It was the devil. He had come. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the devil making the rounds. He looked so ordinary that she found it hard to believe that he was, in fact, the devil. Then he joined her group. As soon as she saw his evil eyes, she knew the rumor was true. This was not someone to be trifled with. Frightened, she left the room and hurried to the cloakroom to get her jacket. She found it empty. Not desiring to stay a moment longer in that wicked atmosphere, she entered the small room full of coats and bags, searching for her windbreaker, her heart pounding madly with fear. Only the prickling of hairs on her neck gave her warning that she was not alone. She whirled with a gasp and came face to face with the blond man, with the devil. His body filled the doorway, blocking her only means of escape, and his cold blue eyes fixed upon her. There was a small smile on his hard lips as he looked into her very soul and saw how weak and pitiful she was, how many secret shames and petty angers she harbored. He despised them. He despised her. She was worth nothing, less than nothing, and deserved every horrible punishment he could devise for her. Her whole body was trembling, and her knees buckled underneath her at the malevolence pulsing through the little room. Horrible images emanated from the still figure in the doorway, crowding into her paralyzed brain. She saw herself encased in a coffin, her body wrapped in chains, so that she could not lash out or attempt to escape. The musty-smelling coffin had been thrust deep into the ground, and she could hear dirt being shoveled on top. Her only companion in this living nightmare was a moldering corpse, its bones cutting deep into her flesh. A tiny candle, left to torment her, was flickering madly as it sucked up the last of the air inside the coffin. Its very presence was killing her. But she despaired at the thought of losing the light. The candle flickered once, twice, and then went out, leaving her gasping hopelessly for oxygen that was no longer there. Terrified, she thrust the images from her mind and backed away from the door, glancing around for some way to escape from this horror. Her eyes landed on a Bible that was lying among the jumble of bags on a nearby table. She grabbed the Bible and threw it at the devil. As it sailed through the air, their eyes locked. His gaze held her transfixed with a terror beyond conscious thought. She would be gutted alive like a fish, her organs wrenched out and exposed to the killing light of day as her blood spewed out upon the cruel ground. She would be fully aware of every wrenching pain, wishing for the mercy of death to blot the anguish. With a piercing cry, she awoke and rolled over. It took 2 attempts to turn on the light. She gazed fearfully around the room, looking for a tall blonde figure, but the room was empty. She lay trembling in her bed with the overhead light on until dawn, a worn Bible clenched in both hands. The next morning was the end of term. Her parents and younger sister helped her clear out her dorm room and pack the car. It was dusk before they settled into their seats for the 2-hour trip home. They talked excitedly as they drove, interrupting each other, contradicting themselves, and laughing. It was good to be together again. It is scary, isn't it, Felicia? Every now and then one of these will be scary. It'll get you. They were 20 minutes from home when they left the highway. Her father turned onto Washington Rock Road, which wound up the mountain through Washington Rock State Park and then down the other side. The area was made into a state park to commemorate the historical events of 1777, when General George Washington had used the large namesake stone as a lookout point. From there, he had a 30-mile panoramic view of the valley and was able to circle his troops behind the British soldiers marching toward Westfield, thereby cutting off their retreat. Her family loved this story, and they always slowed down at the top of the hill to look at the lights in the valley and the fantastic New York City skyline. But tonight was different. Captain. As the car began its ascent, she desperately wished they had chosen another route home. Growing up, she had heard dark stories about the park, rumors of human sacrifices carried out in the woods, and meetings of a satanic church on moonless nights. Utter rot of course, but after her terrifying dream, she did not want to drive through the park at night. A noisy motorcycle tailgated them, trying to pass, even though the road was windy and narrow. Finally, the mountain grew so steep that the driver was forced to slow down, and soon they pulled away from him entirely. The car reached the top of the mountain and started around the long curve that took them through Washington Rock State Park. The night was dark and still. The whole family automatically looked to their right, toward the New York City skyline, but instead, their eyes were drawn to a small park cart sitting at the center of the bend. It was right next to the road, just inside the park boundary, and was eerily illuminated by a brilliant street lamp that none of them have ever noticed before. Inside the vehicle, ... She started to tremble fiercely. Inside the vehicle was a tall, handsome, blond man with eyes that pierced her like a knife and held her transfixed with terror beyond conscious thought. It was the man from her dream. The man everyone said was the devil. The tension in the car was palpable. She had mentioned her dream to no one, but her family could feel the malevolence pulsing from the still figure in the cart. No one spoke as they drew nearer. Suddenly, the engine gave a strange cough. Her father gunned the motor in a silent, desperate battle to keep moving. Her heart stopped for a moment with a clench of fear that shocked her body with physical pain. She gripped her hands together, praying silently as she stared at the figure opposite their car. Here's the illustration. The engine caught again, and her father pressed down hard on the accelerator. Then they were past the man and roaring away from the park toward the downward slope of the mountain. She was sweating profusely, unable to stop shaking. She looked out the rear window at the man in the park cart, sitting ominously still beneath the bright light. At that moment, the motorcycle appeared at the top of the hill and made its way onto the park road. As the rider drew opposite the figure in the cart, she heard the motorcycle's engine cough and then stall. Then the park was out of view, and her family was riding silently toward home, not daring to speak until they were safely indoors. So it looks like the devil got the guy on the motorcycle. Mark this one off. And that'll do it for tonight. We'll be up. Some of you are up for your day, like Deborah and Captain Lee and I think Felicia. Thank you for coming, Captain Lee. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. And see you tomorrow, hopefully. Hopefully I'll be up. See the shell thing tomorrow. The field trip. Bye, Kathy. Crime scene, good morning. Jody, Aurora. See, they're coming out. It's so sweet. Thanks, guys. Take care. See ya.